All right, one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Monday morning. Do have a couple accidents to report. One at Atlas and Shop Road, another one at I-26 westbound with a left lane closed near mile marker 119. An accident at Lorick and North Main, and one more at Piney Grove and I-26. Today, high of 82 with some clouds. Tomorrow, 85 with some early showers, and then partly cloudy, and 87 for Wednesday. Currently 60 here in Columbia on the game. Oh, 9 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on the game. A lot of things to get to over the course of the next couple of hours. It was a very busy weekend for Gamecock sports. But most importantly, Jack, how are we doing on this fine Monday?
Oh, man, I'm exhausted this morning. This stupid time change has just thrown me off today. I slept great. And then I hear my alarm go off at 8:20, and I'm like, dude, I'm so tired.
I love the fact that the sun is going to be out later now, where it's not going to get dark at 5:30. It'll be closer to 7, so you can actually get out and do some things at the end of your day when you get home from work and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that lack of hour of sleep, I feel like when you're growing up as a kid, it's not that big of a deal, whatever, okay. But once you get into college years, obviously once you graduate and start actually working a job, that takes a whole lot longer to recover from for some reason.
You know, we live in such a nice country. It's great living here, but man, why does the United States still partake in this stupid time change? I don't. Daylight savings, spring forward. I just think it's so silly that we're still doing this.
So here's the funny thing is because we do this twice a year, March and then November is when it falls back. And I feel like every time a time change happens, everybody's like, oh, that's the last one. Oh, they're not going to do it anymore after this. And then we get to the next one, it's still happening. Like, this has been debated about forever about getting rid of it, and it just hasn't happened yet for some reason.
I don't know. Probably won't ever happen. But besides that, good weekend.
Oh, well, you spent the entire weekend at Founders Park.
I did. It was a busy, long weekend over there. And yeah, and then it really picks up this week, man. I mean, I'm on the road.
That's right, you are.
I was texting you and Terry yesterday, letting you guys know.
How many miles are you going to put on the card this week?
I am scared to find out, because here's my grand plan for this weekend. So I'm going to Clemson tonight. And before everyone goes and gets their pitchforks, I'm not going to Clemson just to go to Clemson. I'm going to Clemson because it's on the way to Nashville. I'm pit stopping there tonight to go see my brother and my sister, spend the night with my brother. And then tomorrow morning, we get up and at it. We are on the road to Nashville for the SEC tournament. And ideally, in an ideal world, I hate to say it, South Carolina goes one and done. And then I'm on the road Thursday, heading back to Fort Mill, because my mom would kill me if I missed my sister's. She's in theater, and she's got a performance for Charlotte's Web on Thursday night. And that's the only night I could be there. So assuming South Carolina loses on Wednesday, I'm up and on the road to Fort Mill. It's about 500 miles, I think, to Fort Mill on that Thursday. And then Friday morning, if everything works out, I'm on my way to Gainesville. And then from Gainesville, I am going there for the weekend, and then I'm actually spending an extra day or two in Florida. So I'm going down to, I believe, Kissimmee, and then I'm coming back on Tuesday. So it's going to be, if I had to take a guess, I would probably say this is going to be probably close to 1,500 to 2,000 miles this trip. I'm going to fill up my tires today, look at my oil change. It's going to be a lot this week.
Well, have fun with that, Jack. As somebody that doesn't drink caffeine, you might actually need it this time around.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a heck of a week. We'll see how South Carolina does in hoops. That would change things, obviously, if they go on a little bit of a run, but we'll see, man. It's going to be this is what crossover season's all about.
You are probably the hardest working person over at Gamecock Central. I commend you for covering multiple sports the way that you do. And, football obviously is the biggest undertaking because of how massive the sport is. But in terms of travel and stuff like that, it's cake compared to what you're doing this time of year.
No, it's crazy. It's because football is the only sport really going on. And, I mean, yeah, you got basketball starting and baseball barely going on with fall. But, you're staying at home for those things. You aren't going across America like you are right now. So it's crazy, but this is what you do.
Well, Jack gets to see a lot of the country during his job, and again, we'll track all that as he's out and about over the course of the next couple days. We've got a lot to talk about from what happened this past weekend, starting with women's basketball right after the Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped. Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm, sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. Yesterday, South Carolina women fall to Texas 78-61 in the finals of the SEC Women's Tournament. And Dawn Staley, she described what went wrong at the beginning of the game.
It's a little bit of both. I think they made plays. They forced us to play a certain way. I mean, turning the ball over isn't something that you can start a game like Texas and give them a head start. Give them a 12-point lead. It didn't feel right, just from a mental and physical standpoint. You could try to keep pushing through, but every time that we would try to make a run, we had just like mental lapses, like uncharacteristic turnovers. Some of it was us, some of it was Texas, and they took advantage of it every single time, no matter who caused it.
Texas jumps out to a 14-0 lead to start this game. In the first couple of minutes, South Carolina commits 5 turnovers in that period of time and only gets 1 shot off, and that was really kind of the game from that point. Carolina was able to get it down to 9 a couple of different times, but for the most part, Texas kind of managed roughly a 12 to 15-point gap for the rest of the game and kind of cruised to a victory.
Yeah, I mean, that 14-0 run to start the game really put, an early dagger in South Carolina's chances to win that game. It wasn't that it was unavoidable it's impossible to come back from that, but every time South Carolina did go on a little bit of a run, Texas answered right back, and it's kind of like that was the whole thing. It was a little bit of this big cat and mouse chase until it's like the mouse is just never catching up to the cat is never catching up to the mouse. So, and here's the other thing. Apparently Dawn Staley doesn't like to really call, timeouts in those situations. I personally would have, as soon as it got to 10-0 to open the game, call a timeout. It's too important of a game not to call that timeout and stick to your normal routine, right? You got to call a timeout there, in my opinion. I get why she didn't, and she's obviously, she knows what she's doing, but maybe it would have made things a little bit different, allow you to reset a little bit sooner before things really got out of hand. And really, I mean, once you're down 15 points at the end of the first quarter, I mean, it's not impossible. The margin was a lot closer the rest of the way, 18-16 the second quarter, Texas, 16-12 South Carolina in the third quarter, and then 21-17 the fourth quarter for Texas. It was closer the rest of the way. Had South Carolina had that bad quarter, maybe things are a little bit different, but ultimately, in the end, just too much to overcome.
Yeah, if you take roughly the final 35 minutes of this game, because, again, most of that 14-0 run was in the first 5 minutes for Texas. The other 35 minutes, it was a pretty nip-and-tuck game back and forth, and we've been talking about this coming very much down to the wire. But like you said, Carolina, I think their longest run when they did get it to 9 at one point was like a 6-0 run, but then Texas answers back immediately. And there was just never a period of time where South Carolina took the game over. And, Dawn did talk about it after the game on Sunday of not taking that early timeout. Here's what she had to say.
No. If I did, I would have called the timeout. Just like let our players play through it a little bit. Didn't. I don't usually do it. See if we could gather ourselves and just make a play on both sides of the basketball. We couldn't do it.
And it's funny because we're so conditioned when watching this team to never count them out. And even watching this game yesterday, as again, Texas was kind of managing that 12 to 15 point gap for most of the game, I was expecting Carolina to just turn it on, dominate defensively in the fourth quarter, close the gap, and make a game out of this. And it didn't really happen. And again, Dawn Staley's seen this a million times before. We've seen them get off to slow starts. That was kind of a thing about the team a year ago, was they were kind of getting off the bus kind of slow. They'd wake up around halftime and then, go and win the game by 15 or 20 points. And yeah, you can do that against a lot of teams. Texas is really good. Texas is a team that's already beaten South Carolina once this year going back to Thanksgiving. When you give them that kind of advantage, again, Carolina played really well for the other 35 minutes, but that was just too much to overcome at the end of the day.
It really was. And the other thing was, I watched probably about – I didn't watch this entire game, so I can't really speak to it the full extent. I watched a good bit, though, I will say that. But especially once it got out of hand, I was kind of done watching by that point. But the thing was, the officiating seemed to be pretty rough. There were a few calls where I'm just like, what are they calling a foul there for? I don't think that's a foul. And that probably helped Texas out a little bit in this game. Although, South Carolina shot far more free throws in this game. So, say what you want.
Missed a lot of them, though.
Missed a lot of them. Yeah, you're not winning games shooting 12 to 23 at the free throw line. Like, that's not good. And Texas only went 6 of 9. So, I would say the bad fouls argument, it works to some extent, but let's just be honest, it's not the reason why South Carolina lost. At the end of the day, Texas shot 54% from the field, 57% from three-point range, just took advantage of its opportunities. And I think the other big thing was they had some players get into foul trouble, yet they still were able to really get the most out of Carlton and Madison Booker. Those two specifically were really good in this game, and just too much for South Carolina to stop.
Yeah, again, that's the SEC Tournament Championship. Yesterday, we'll see how the final brackets end up coming out with Selection Sunday coming up here in a little less than a week's time. How do we feel about this South Carolina team, having seen them lose to a team like Texas twice this year, 3 losses overall, including the one to Oklahoma earlier on this year in conference play? We'll get into a little bit of what Dawn Staley had to say after the game about looking forward and the message to her team coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri along with you here on your Monday on the Game. It's all right here for our friends over at Twin Peaks. I don't know if you've checked your calendar, but a week from tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, and you can get ready over at Twin Peaks this St. Patrick's Day and join the crew on March 17th for Irish-inspired specials, ice cold 29-degree green beers, and your favorite scratch-made favorites like loaded nachos, crispy wings, and hearty entrees to fuel the fun. You can also catch the start of March Madness as well on their massive screens with wall-to-wall coverage, frosty drafts, and the friendliest crew in town. No better spot to celebrate the luck of the Irish or just crush some game day grub than with our friends over at Twin Peaks, located at 600 Gervais Street right here in the heart of the Vista. Your lodge for great food, great drinks, great vibes. We'll see you there.
Yeah, I mean, our team knows we didn't play our best basketball, not nearly what we're capable of doing, and told them that the last time we lost in this situation, we won the national championship. So you got to think about that. It might be the very thing this team needs. It's not what I would think, yesterday coming in today, but now that we're here and it's a reality, you search for things that have a connection that can give your team what it needs to make this run for a national championship. I do think we have enough in the room to do that. We'll rest and recoup at the end of the month, at the end of the week, and start that journey.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry with you on your Monday here on the game. Dawn Staley yesterday about the message she gave to her team after the loss in the SEC Women's Tournament Final to Texas, 78-61. They'll obviously have a little bit of time off before the women's tournament gets rolling right alongside the men's coming up the end of next week. But it is interesting, Jack, because this seems like one of the more vulnerable teams we've seen for South Carolina entering the NCAA tournament in the past handful of years. She did mention last time they lost the tournament final to Kentucky back in 2022. They did go on to win the national championship that year. So we'll see if that same kind of luck can hold true this time. But this team has, and it's also had its share of injuries and, girls being out and stuff like that. But this team is a little more, I'd say, worrisome than some of the past ones have been entering the tournament.
Definitely feels that way. It does not. It's not a great look the way that game went yesterday, but I don't think it necessarily changes a lot outside of, okay, South Carolina is likely not going to Fort Worth anymore for the regional. Like, they're going to be likely going to Sacramento as the fourth number one seed, which, okay, I mean, someone was going to have to go there probably. And for Texas, I mean, they'll probably be the third overall number one seed and be right there in Fort Worth. So it's a home game for them, essentially, if they can get through the first two rounds of, round of 32, round of 64, and then get into the Sweet 16 and whatnot. But, yeah, South Carolina probably going to have to go out to the West Coast. That's the only thing that changes, in my opinion. Besides that, look, Texas is a really good team. They are one of the, coming into yesterday, one of the two teams that had gotten South Carolina this year. Because you got to remember, they lost that game in Vegas, what feels like a lifetime ago. So, yeah, not exactly great losing that game yesterday. But again, they've responded so well after losses this season that I'm just like, you know what? Whatever. It happened. You can use the tired excuse, but Texas also played multiple games in multiple days. It's fine. And someone had to lose that game. Now you just go out here. You heat back up here in the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament. You go out to California most likely, and then you go from there. But I think this team is more than capable of winning winning the national title still.
It's one of those things where I could very much see South Carolina going on a tear and winning every single game and hoisting the national championship coming up here in a month's time. Or I could see them, and just looking at their bracket here, you mentioned them being on the Sacramento side of things, where they are the number 4 overall. They're the 4th overall top seed out of the 4 number 1 seeds. They could lose to Iowa and then Elite 8. They could lose to UCLA in the Final Four. Like, those things are very probable happening because this team does have, some of those off days like they had yesterday against a team like Texas. And if you spot UCLA 14 points to start a game, you're probably not going to win that one either. So it's going to be really interesting. I think we always kind of go into every tournament with this team just assuming they're going to be in the Final Four. I think it's going to be a little bit of a trickier road just to get to that point than it has been in the past couple of years. And again, we've talked about Dawn's teams using these losses as motivation and playing their best basketball afterwards, because after they lost to Texas, they went on a tear for a while. After they lost to Oklahoma, they went on a tear for a while, and we'll see what they do after this one, and having a few extra days to heal up and rest up before hosting some games coming up here at the end of next week.
Yeah, and you know what? They're going to get some time off here this week to really just reset and get ready for Selection Sunday. Like, they're going to almost have because the women's tournament starts basically the same time as the men's, right?
Yes.
Like 2 weeks
so
from
week and a half.
Yeah, week and a half. Like, they're going to have time to reset. Make no mistake. Like, I'm sure practice this week, whenever they do practice, will probably be not intense, but I feel like it'll definitely ramp up a bit as they get closer to the tournament. But they're going to learn from this game, right? They're going to learn from that mistake, and Yeah, I think it's I think it's a coachable moment, that game, for the players, obviously going through that early run, but I also think it's a coachable moment for even someone as great as Dawn Staley, who you may feel like doesn't even need coaching at this point. But again, that situation, could have. Again, I say that they needed to call a timeout in that situation, just because it's such a critical game. Like, imagine it's the national championship and something similar happens and South Carolina goes down, let's say 10-0 in the first, 5 minutes of that game, or 2 minutes of that game. Maybe call a timeout in that situation, just because it's the national championship and you need to make sure you're not falling behind the wheel, just like you did, against Texas, a month earlier. So, we'll see what happens, but, hopefully everyone involved can learn from this game, and it'll be better next time.
Of course, we're not going to look back on this weekend as favorably because they didn't end up winning the SEC tournament championship. They did extend their winning streak against LSU to 19 straight games for their win on Saturday in a very tough, tightly contested game, 83-77. It's really funny because South Carolina LSU is kind of positioned as the big rivalry in the sport right now. Again, there's a reason why they got prime time on ABC on Valentine's night a month ago for that game that South Carolina won down in Baton Rouge. But really, from a competitive standpoint, Texas and South Carolina should be that featured rivalry, because there is a back-and-forth element where you go into each matchup not really knowing who's going to win, where until proven otherwise, when Carolina plays LSU, I know Carolina's going to win.
Yeah, and it kind of leaves a little bit of like you kind of just forget about that LSU win, because it was such a great win for South Carolina, and the game over Kentucky was really great too. But I feel like a lot of that's going to be forgotten just because of this Texas game. And I agree. I think Texas, South Carolina is the better rivalry. I mean, Texas, it feels like every year these two teams play, both sides are winning at least once. South Carolina's won more times than not, and Vic Schaefer's gotten owned by Dawn Staley, especially in the postseason up until yesterday. But, with LSU, it's like, Kim Mulkey just can't beat South Carolina. And I don't know when that day's going to come. I thought maybe it would have come this season, given that you have full Wiley there now in Baton Rouge, and you get the home game against South Carolina on Valentine's Day, prime time Saturday night. And then the SEC tournament's another opportunity, but no, it just did not happen. And quite frankly, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's all kind of undermined now just by the fact of what happened in that title game.
Yeah, looking at the breakdown of what Charlie Kareem's got for his latest bracketology as of right now against South Carolina, the fourth number one seed, they'd be sending it out to Region 4 in Sacramento, which would pair them up with Region 2, which is headed by UCLA, who's the second overall number one seed. LSU's on the other side. LSU's within that side of the Sacramento bracket, so theoretically South Carolina could face off with an LSU in a Final Four if they were able to run the table and beat UCLA. And South Carolina handles their business. Let's see, Oklahoma, who going into yesterday was on South Carolina's side of the bracket. They're now in Texas' side of the bracket. So that's a team that you potentially wouldn't be able to rematch with until you got to a national championship game. So, again, we'll see how perfect this is in terms of what's projected and how it ends up looking. But right now, Carolina's looking at teams like TCU and Iowa as teams in Minnesota to worry about the most on their side of the bracket out there in Sacramento.
Yeah, it'll be tough regardless. I'm interested to see which one seed they'd be paired with. Whether it's UConn would be, that would be tough, because if they're the fourth number one overall seed, I wonder. I mean, I would imagine that the top one probably gets paired. I'm not sure, but it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Who's in these regions? Like they'll get an easy first game with the 16th seed, and the 9-8 game. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think South Carolina is going to be fine. Like, again, I think we all be stunned if they're getting upset early on in the first two weekends. Like the full expectation at this point still should be getting to the Final Four, going from there, competing for a national championship. Like that should all still be very much on the table at this point, getting to Phoenix by the end of all this.
We'll ultimately find out what that bracket looks like in a couple days, and obviously a good time for Dawn Staley's team to rest up and heal up, getting set for the tournament, which will be starting here as the number 1 seed. They'll get to host the first couple rounds before proceeding further on in the bracket. We'll come back. We'll dive into what happened over at Founders Park over the weekend against Princeton. Long weekend for Jack and the team. With that next, it is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry with you on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri along with you here on your Monday on the Game. As I mentioned, Jack had a very busy weekend over at Founders Park with a doubleheader on Saturday and game number 3 late last night on Sunday. I made it out there on Saturday for game number 1. Nice day. Got my first sunburn of the year, by the way. That's always fun.
Yeah, it was a warm weekend at the ballpark. Last night was, it was okay. I think if that game had been played during the day yesterday, it would have been pretty warm outside. But yeah, Saturday and Saturday was really warm outside and doubleheader. And yeah, the Gamecocks just played really well this weekend, especially on a weekend where I know, as we'll talk about later on here, it wasn't perfect for other teams around the country. So good to see South Carolina having a great weekend in a sweep against Princeton.
Was it the weather that moved the game late yesterday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
I didn't see any official. I just saw that the game got changed. I'm like, oh, I guess because it's going to rain in the middle of the afternoon. That would be why.
I thought they should have just played the game at like noon, to be honest. I don't know why they bumped it back all the way to 7, but because especially since the rain was coming around that time. So it was a little strange, but regardless, they got the game in, no problem. And yeah, it was a good weekend overall.
So kind of go through the 3 games here. Carolina wins game number 1 on Saturday, 10-7. And what was obviously a little bit more of a back-and-forth affair than I think people wanted. Josh Gunther didn't get off to the best start. The offense took a few innings to wake up. They ultimately did and were able to win at the end of the day, but not especially for a team in Princeton. We talked about how much they'd struggled at the plate coming into this series, as not exactly how you wanted to get things done or have that win look. But at the end of the day, you won, which is the most important thing.
Yes, it was definitely. The funny thing about this weekend was South Carolina fell behind in the first. They gave up runs in the first inning to Princeton in the first 2 games of the series in that doubleheader, and then didn't have their first scoreless inning until Sunday. And that was just, it was kind of crazy that a team like Princeton that came to the weekend hitting under 200 as a group really just dominated South Carolina right out of the gate. They jumped on them early and often, and that made it a little bit tough, made it a little bit uncomfortable right at the start, but give this team a lot of credit. And look, in SEC play and playing better opponents, you're going to have to make sure your teams are not getting out to an early lead, because that could be a huge hole to come back from. But against a team like Princeton, you should be able to kind of slug your way back into the game, and that's what they did with 10 runs and really got the bats going in that game.
Second game, Riley Goodman, a pretty strong outing for him, seemed to be under command a little bit better in that one. Carolina picks up the 4-3 win against Princeton. Again, really slow out of the gate for the most part offensively, kind of hit their stride there in the middle of the game with a couple of runs in the 5th, a run in the 7th, and a run in the 8th, which is obviously enough, but still a little close for comfort against a team that we would have thought Carolina would have been able to get away from a little bit easier.
But, man, the highlight of this weekend for sure is going to be Logan Sutter. I mean, just an absolutely, when he is at his best, he can carry this offense. He is just a, for lack of a better term, he's a beast at the plate. I mean, the guy swings the bat really well, and that home run he hit in the 8th inning was just, a sight to see. And he had hit 2 home runs on Saturday, 1 in each game of that doubleheader. So, nice win for South Carolina. And honestly, I think Maneri put it best after the game that not every game's going to be a blowout, but winning a lot of these close games does a lot for the team and their confidence moving forward. So, yeah, it's not great to win a 1-run game and score late against a team like Princeton, but considering it was just right off of a doubleheader, or right off of the first game of a doubleheader, it was nice to see this team, persevere and find a way to win in the end.
And then last night for Game 3, again, a later start than originally expected, 7:15 over at Founders Park. Carolina dominates 13-1 in 7 innings with the run rule, kind of how we were hoping a lot of the weekend was going to go. But nevertheless, they got themselves a sweep, and Coach Maneri talked after the game about being 5-0 on the week.
Nice to finish off a week going 5-0. I challenged the guys at the beginning of the week, and we had some tough games during the course of this week, but we found a way to prevail and get our record back to something that's respectable. And more importantly than even the record is, I just feel like our team is growing, getting better, and obviously the story tonight was Amp. He pitched great, like I know he can. And we got a bunch of clutch hits today. Several guys came through with big hits, and it was nice to have a bit of an offensive explosion, and took a lot of pressure off our bullpen today, which was a good thing.
As you mentioned there, Am Phillips with a really solid outing, 5 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run with 7 strikeouts on 82 pitches. And again, the offense just completely exploded there in game number 3. And I was worried because, again, the story of this team has kind of been struggling in the back end of the weekend, as we saw in the first couple series. And I wondered with a doubleheader on a hot day like Saturday was, how they're going to respond, especially with an extra long layoff, going through the afternoon on Sunday. But they went out there and did a phenomenal job, especially offensively, and again, were able to sweep their first series of the season, which, again, it's Princeton. That's not a great team, all things considered, but there is something to be said about going out there and doing your job, which they did.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. It's such a silly thing that we have to talk about. Like, the first weekend of the year, Mineri's got the quote of the season saying that the team was tired and sore after 2 days of playing with, 53 more games to go at the time. But, yeah, look, they really, in my opinion, they saved their best for last this weekend, right? The doubleheader on Saturday was a long day. Players were at the ballpark for over 12 hours. That's a very long day, and it's a long season. And as the weather heats up, the fatigue is really going to set in, I think. But give them a lot of credit. I think it was a very positive thing to see them go out here, win both games Saturday, and I think the delay, probably the game being pushed back, probably helped a little bit, since it's not a day game right after playing 2 games the day before. So I think it helped from that standpoint, but they really did go out here and play their best game on Sunday. I mean, it was unequivocally best game. Season high in runs, 15 hits. You hit your first grand slam. Logan Sutter continues to crush it, and pitching was really good in this one. So overall, great game for South Carolina.
One of the things we talked about going into the weekend was Logan Sutter, who seemed to kind of finally be hitting his stride. And I question, could he stay off of Maneri's bad side, not get picked off at first base, not make mistakes in the field where Maneri would feel the need to pluck him out of the lineup? And he did enough this weekend to stay out there and had a phenomenal weekend overall, 6 of 10 with 7 RBIs and a home run in each game. In his last 6 games, again, he's not played in the last 6. In the last 6 games he has appeared in, 10 of 20, 10 RBIs, 4 home runs.
I think he really is the straw that stirs the drink with this team. I think he is the guy that you picked up out of the transfer portal, and I think you knew immediately, look at his stats from Purdue, and you're like, that's the guy. That's the guy that's going to get this team back to where they need to be. And it's still a long season ahead. SEC play hasn't even started yet. But I do think you feel so much better about this group heading into conference play when this guy is hitting the ball the way he can, because South Carolina's going to need him. And he's hitting 6th right now. Where does he hit this weekend? We'll find out. But doesn't really matter. I mean, wherever he's hitting in this lineup, as long as he's got to be in there every day moving forward. I don't really care if him and Paul, I don't know if there's anything going on there. I mean, obviously he gets picked off the other day and he gets taken out immediately after the game or after that inning there, and he hasn't played at certain times this year, and he's been benched a few times. It's been a weird year so far, but Logan's hitting so well right now that I don't care what's going on. You cannot let anything get in the way of that. You cannot bench this guy moving forward. He needs to be in the lineup every day moving forward until proven otherwise.
Yeah, and especially with Reese Moore being out for the season, that DH role is wide open. That seems perfect for him if he's not going to be out there playing in the field. But yeah, until he just tremendously cools off, which we hope doesn't happen, he needs to be out there, and obviously proved that over the weekend. As you mentioned, Lee Croy with the grand slam yesterday, still hitting the ball incredibly well, as he had a really good weekend. Scobie as well. Tyler Bach had a really nice rebound this weekend. So you're getting it. I get it. It's Princeton. So take it with a slight grain of salt. We'll see what happens this upcoming weekend against Florida. We'll get into what happened with them in a moment. But again, this is the offense that we thought we were going to see, at least in a couple games this past weekend, where, in games 1 and 3, you combined to score 23 total runs. That's more like it, because, again, the pitching's had its ups and downs so far. We still think that's probably the overall strength of this team, but you're going to need offense to win in the SEC, and hopefully some of these numbers can replicate as you get into conference play.
Yeah, I have a few, questions about this pitching staff right now from a starting standpoint. Gunther wasn't great by any means. You have those 2 runs early, but he only went 3 1/3 innings. 6 strikeouts, no walks are great. Goodman, it was a better start for him, but it was still 20 pitches an inning and getting into a lot of 3-ball counts. So he's got to continue to get himself going. And then Phillips was really good. Here's the thing. I think South Carolina has its starting rotation for now, and I think it has a real nice bullpen. But I'm still waiting for those starters to put it all together for an entire weekend. If you get what I'm saying here.
They'll got one more game in the non-conference before they get into the SEC play. That'll be taking on the Citadel tomorrow over at Founders Park. Pregame coverage starting at 6:45 for a 7 o'clock first pitch right here on 107.5 The Game. Then, like Jack said, on the road to Gainesville coming up later on this week. We'll get into the stats that matter. Also take a look around the SEC. Now, other teams have fared so far this year in in baseball play as we wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, Jack Felcher, wrapping up hour number 1 here on your Monday on the Game. We did have a winner because of Talmadge Lecroy's Grand Slam last night in game number 3 against Princeton of the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest. We'll announce that winner coming up at some point this week. But now it all resets back down to $25 for tomorrow night's game against the Citadel. Go online to 1075thegame.com and register for the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest as, again, that pot goes up by $25 each and every game. Looking at the stats that matter from over the weekend, runners in scoring position, Carolina 12 of 34 on the weekend. Runners on base, got a lot of them. 19 of 59 in total. 16 total strikeouts on the weekend, including only 2 yesterday, which is great. Carolina pitched, again, pretty well for the most part this weekend. Let's see here. That would be 31 total strikeouts, only 8 free passes, and only gave up 8 extra base hits with 4 errors. That still needs to be cleaned up. But all things considered, these numbers add up to a weekend sweep, which is the first one that Carolina's had this weekend, and we'll take it.
Really nice weekend for the Gamecocks. Played really well overall. I think the defense, yes, the defense needs to be cleaned up. It's something that it hasn't been. It's concerning. Let's say that it's not at the top of mind right now, and really hasn't been brought. I've refrained from bringing it up more in press conferences just because they are otherwise playing pretty well. Now, if this happens again this weekend and they lose, then yes, I think it needs to be brought up for sure and addressed, because it feels like every game at this point, I think aside from like 2 games this year, they've had an error in every game, but like at least 2. So it's been an issue, needs to be cleaned up, and it's nice when you're scoring 10 runs and all that, but when you're facing SEC pitching, it might be a little bit tougher. But good to see this team getting a sweep, especially when other teams around the country just really didn't have good weekends. It's
been an interesting start to the year for teams in the SEC, especially ones that are ranked that Carolina will see, and none other than Florida this upcoming weekend. They lost 2 out of 3 against High Point, lost the first 2 games over the weekend. They needed 12 runs to beat them yesterday in game number 3, so some inefficiencies there. When you look at teams like Vanderbilt, they've lost 5 out of the last 8. They got beaten by a pretty bad North Dakota State team yesterday. Let's see, Georgia's lost some midweeks to Troy and Western Carolina. Tennessee lost a series to Kent State at home a couple weeks ago. Arkansas has lost to teams like Arkansas State and Stetson. LSU has lost 4 out of their last 5, including the last 2 to Sacramento State over the weekend. They lost to McNeese in a midweek earlier on this year as well. So something odd going on in the SEC right now.
LSU, for instance, is 12-5 right now. 5 losses are their most in non-conference play before SEC play begins since 2020. So, look, LSU and South Carolina have the same record right now. Difference is LSU, as of yesterday, that will change after today, was the number 2 ranked team in the country. So, all that to be said, I'm not comparing South Carolina and LSU, but let's just put it this way. South Carolina having 5 losses and 2 of them coming to Clemson really isn't that terrible of a look when you see that other teams around the country are losing to 5-10 Sacramento State, Western Carolina. You got North Dakota State, who's 2-13 this year. Stetson was 6-10. Wright State's 5-8. High Point. High Point, that's the series right there that I think surprised a lot of people the most. High Point won the first 2 games of this weekend, and I believe was leading 11-8 going into the final inning yesterday. Problem is for High Point, and this is normally how the big SEC teams are supposed to be beating the mid-majors, is that the mid-majors just don't have the same type of depth as the SEC schools. Number one, because you're traveling, you have a smaller roster. High Point basically just ran out of guys to throw by the end of the game. Nobody could throw a strike. I think their coach brought in like 4 different pitchers in the final inning, and just nobody could throw a strike. Florida won this game with, I think, 3 straight walks with the bases loaded. So Florida kind of got handed this victory in the end. If High Point had someone who could throw a strike out there, maybe the game ends differently. But yeah, if I'm Florida, I'm not celebrating what happened yesterday. 12 runs, but they also had 4 errors. So, all this to be said, you could be concerned about South Carolina if you want. I think they're playing really good baseball right now, heading into conference play. I know it's against nobody teams for the most part, but then again, look around the country. South Carolina wasn't the only one that lost to Northern Kentucky and Army this year. Right? Like the other teams around the country have lost to probably arguably worse teams this year.
Yeah, and I just think you don't give Carolina as much of a benefit of the doubt because they weren't projected to be great anyway. Again, picked towards the bottom of the SEC going into the year, obviously not ranked. So when they lose, I think it's a little bit more magnified here locally. It's like, well, that's just, justifying the low opinion people had of this team, where it's like when LSU or Florida loses these games, like, yeah, well, they're still trying to figure it out. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I just think that's how those things are looked at. And again, we'll see how the new poll should come out sometime later on this morning. We'll see how much those teams were affected by those losses over the weekend. But I think people still view LSU, Florida, Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee as better teams than South Carolina, even though they've had similar struggles.
And those teams will be fine. I have no doubt about it. But it is good for South Carolina from this standpoint of South Carolina's playing better baseball, won 5 straight games. They have a chance to make it 6 in a row. I think people just forget that, yes, they got off to a bit of a slow start, and they were 7-5. But if they are able to go 13-5 through these first 18 games of the year before SEC play gets going, I think you take it, considering they'd be on a 6-game winning streak heading into Florida, especially playing Florida at a time where they look very vulnerable. Pitching has been awful for them this year so far. And yes, I know they just swept Miami 2 weeks ago in a 2-game series, but I mean, the recency just shows that I think Florida is very beatable. And for South Carolina, looking to try to get off to a good start, this is the weekend to really show what they can do.
Baseball back in action tomorrow night, taking on the Citadel, 6 o'clock pregame, 7 o'clock first pitch right here in the game. Then it's off to Gainesville this upcoming weekend. Men's basketball regular season is in the books. What happened on Saturday? And we'll look ahead to the SEC men's tournament coming up in hour number 2 here in the game.
All right, everyone, as we close out the first hour here, if you're a small business owner, a church, or other entity in need of a new HVAC system, AAA Heating and Air has exciting news for you. AAA now offers financing to qualified organizations to aid them in installing a new light commercial HVAC system. It's as easy as calling AAA Heating and Air for a quote or find them online at callAAAtoday.com. Tell them Jack from 107.5 The Game sent you on over. At AAA Heating and Air, they have got your back. They're offering up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check required. That's right. No need to worry about your credit score. As long as you're a homeowner with a valid bank account, you'll be good to go. Take control of your comfort today by giving a call to AAA Heating and Air at 803-677-1500. Again, the number to call AAA Heating and Air is going to be 803-677-1500. Give them a call today and breathe easy again.
Hour number 2, welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri with you here on your Monday on the game. Again, a lot of things happening over the weekend in sports, so maybe you weren't locked in to what was happening with men's basketball as they wrapped up their regular season on the road at Ole Miss. And I don't blame you. It's been a rough season, obviously, but you did miss this happening at the end.
Get it in, and here comes Meach into the front court. Pulls up, lets a long three go, and buries it. 7/10 of a second left. Meechie Johnson from 30 feet. Ole Miss will inbound to Dia. He lets it go with the buzzer, and it's off the top of the backboard. And you can put Spurs on this one. Meechie Johnson with a three-pointer in the final second of play. Wins it for the Gamecocks against Ole Miss, and Carolina will wrap up the regular season with its 4th SEC win of the season.
Derek Scott on the call there on the Gamecocks radio network is, yes, Meechie Johnson hits. Not quite a buzzer beater because there was like 0.7 seconds left on the clock, but a game ender nonetheless as Carolina picks up the 64-61 win on the road at Ole Miss to wrap up the regular season with, as you just heard there, 4 wins in SEC play as they head into the tournament, which we'll get to coming up here in a moment in Nashville, coming up on Wednesday for the opening round. And look, we haven't had a lot of things to be happy and excited about with this team, so a almost exact buzzer beater by Meechie, we can enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, no, it was nice to see Meechie in his final regular season game kind of going out with a literal bang. He's played so well this year, I think. He is, I will say this, I think a lot of people, including myself, have probably been critical of him over the years of just his inconsistency. Like, I think I remember like a few years ago, it was like Missouri. He just had 0 points. He shot like 11 from the field, I think. It was something ridiculous like that. Like, there were games like that where he just would go off, and then the next night it'd be like, he does nothing. I mean, it was so inconsistent to the point where it's like, that was just who he was. But give him a lot of credit. He's having a career year. I think whenever the all-SEC stuff comes out, I think this guy needs to be on, I doubt it would be the first team, but I think he's got to be like on the second or third team, however many teams there are. I think he's got to find his way on there because he's just played really well this year. And most importantly, he's found consistency, especially over this last month. He's just played really good basketball. And, yeah, that's what you need. Like, that's what March is all about. Like, when you think of, like, teams that go on runs, like, remember when Kemba Walker, led UConn on that 5 wins in 5 days at the Big East tournament. Like, that's what South Carolina needs here if they're going to go on any sort of run, is that they need their leader, Meechie Johnson, to go out here and just, score buckets.
Well, if we want to be technical about things, technically Carolina doubled their win total in conference play from a year ago. They only won 2 games last year in the regular season. They now won 4. So, technically speaking, they did make an improvement over last year. Not by much, and you're still at the very bottom of the SEC, but it's, all things considered, not as bad as last season was.
Yeah, I mean, from a wins-loss standpoint, yes, and you avoid ending up with another 20-loss season. So, at worst, South Carolina is going to lose 19 games this season, which, okay, fine. I mean, look, it hasn't been a great year for South Carolina, but here's the thing, and I know a lot of people want LP to be gone and whatnot, but you got to give this team credit. They're continuing to play hard, and they could have easily thrown in the towel after some of these losses, and I thought they certainly would have, considering it just felt like they gave up early on in the year when they're basically a no-show against Arkansas and Florida and all these different games, and they had just lost to Tennessee by 20 points. So coming into this game, I don't think anyone was really expecting much, but for them to go out here, win this game the way they did, play hard, have the lead for pretty much the entire game, I think it just says a lot, and I think it just shows the kids are definitely bought into LP despite this being a tough year.
Can we claim the Mississippi State Championship? They did beat both Mississippi schools.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
And third, Southern Miss in the second game of the season, too.
I was just about to say this. I think I saw a funny tweet over the weekend. I forget who tweeted it out, so I'm sorry if I'm misremembering here. But somebody had tweeted out that Meechie needs to be the mayor of or the governor of Mississippi just because he's owned Mississippi State, Southern Miss. South Carolina won that game because of him. I don't care what you say. South Carolina won that game on his shoulders, and then this game too. I mean, just he's been so good for South Carolina this year, and yeah, I mean, winning these games over these schools is it's definitely a nice step in the right direction. It doesn't change much this year, But it's a nice confidence builder, I'd say, heading into this week out in Nashville.
Again, as we've been talking about, we know a decision has to be made in reference to Lamont Paris over the weekend. Pete Nako's put out his latest updates on all the coaches on hot seats in men's basketball as of right now. Lamont Paris was featured on there as well. And again, he mentions Jeremiah Donati would need to decide this spring if he wants to buy out Paris, which would be around the $10 million mark. It appears unlikely at this point, despite dropping 4 out of their last 6 games. And again, this is kind of the conversation you and I have been having for the past couple weeks here. It seems like all signs are pointing to Lamont Paris coming back. Could there have been a change of heart if South Carolina had gotten obliterated in the Mississippi State and Ole Miss games? And that would have been, what, a, 12 game losing streak to end out the year if they were to have done that, whatever number that was. But they did get a couple wins down the stretch there. Again, it's not great. You're still towards the bottom of the SEC, but it wasn't as bad as a season ago. And again, I'd be very shocked if Donati did move on from Lamont Paris.
I think so, too. And, again, we'll see how the transfer portal shakes out because I think everyone expects a whole overhaul of the roster just like we saw after last season. But, yeah, I saw the post-game video of Lamont going into the locker room and dancing and stuff and just seeing the way those guys reacted to him and just having – I didn't see anyone – you wouldn't be able to tell that team is, 4-14 in conference play and, going through some tough times this year and feeling like a bunch of guys are going to end up transferring when you see their reactions and the smiles on their faces and whatnot. And maybe they will still all transfer. Who knows? But, I think South Carolina, it's been a tough year, but seeing the way that group was able to go out there and win that game, it's good to see. And who knows, man? I mean, I know they're the 14 seed, but crazy things can happen, and I don't expect much this week, but especially since you're playing an Oklahoma team, the tournament is a lot better than when you played them back in January. But who knows, man? Momentum is it's a funny thing.
You mentioned the celebration in the locker room after the game, and I know people can look at that and say, what are you celebrating? You went 4-14 in conference play, an embarrassing season, and all that kind of stuff. Winning's hard. Right? And for a team that's had as many struggles as South Carolina's had this year, going back to last year as well, you kind of savor everything that you can get. Yeah, it wasn't me in the grand scheme of things, not a whole lot, but for a lot of those guys, they're coming towards the very end of their respective basketball careers. Funny enough, Norton Capich has taken off these last couple games. Hadn't quite figured that one out, but he's at least closing things out strong. We'll see what Michi Johnson does, in his career at the next level, NBA, international, or whatever, it may end up being, but winning can still be fun, even if you're not on a good team. So I can understand them trying to embrace it and enjoy it for as much as they can because, again, you don't know if that was the last one of your career or not.
Yeah, and you're right about Capich. He is playing a lot better. I don't know where this is coming from. I really could not tell you, honestly. 12 points, 2 threes, 4 of 7 shooting, 4 rebounds, 1 block.
Because he wasn't even getting on the court for a lot of SEC play.
No, he was a bench warmer. Him and Jordan Butler were the 2 bench warmers. But he's playing 21 minutes now off the bench. So, I think you feel good about a guy like that doing something. You're going to need production from other guys. I'll say this though, I do feel good about South Carolina maybe winning. I don't necessarily think it's a for sure thing that they're one and done this week. I think there is a definite possibility just because they really did play well against Oklahoma in January, number one. But I think this team, despite their flaws, the obvious flaw is the size factor. But look, when Michi's playing well, Kobe Knox playing pretty good, Norton Capich adds to all this. 4 of your 5 starters are typically pretty reliable. That would be Michi, Knox, Sharver Jumps, and then Strong. Typically, those guys are pretty good. And then if you add in a decent performance from Norton Capich, and I also like Miles Studi coming off the bench. I have not understood for the life of me why he started so much this year. I get it. He's a 5th-year guy. He's a veteran. He's been around here for a long time. Good player. But, man, he has not been good this year. So him coming off the bench, getting 6 points and hitting 2 threes in 18 minutes, that's a nice role for him. That's a nice role for Capich and Studi coming off the bench. And then if you get a decent enough, pretty good game from your starting 5 with those 4 players I mentioned, you have a chance to win. So we'll see. Not saying South Carolina's going to win the SEC tournament here. Obviously not. But I do think it's not as simple as, they're just going one and done. Like, they have the potential to at least stay for an extra night out in Nashville.
Lamont Paris, after the win on Saturday, talked about just being able to enjoy it and embrace it being the fun win that it was.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, you just reflect on what it must feel like for the guys, and especially for Michi Johnson in that moment. So pretty cool. In a neat way to end the entire season, regular season, and go into tournament time. We talked about that as we went in there, that nothing says March like half-court buzzer beaters. And so what a way to get the whole thing started as we prepare and get ourselves ready to go to Nashville.
And for Michi Johnson, a cool moment. Again, he's going to get at least one more game coming up on Wednesday against Oklahoma, but I don't know what his future career holds past this, and that's not going to be the defining moment of his career here by any means, but he's somebody that's always played hard, right? And even in the ups and downs of his career, and he's been hot and he's been cold, he's always been a team guy, and for what the game was on Saturday, cool to see him get that kind of moment as he comes to the end of his Gamecock career.
Hey, it's what you need. You need that type of guy to go out there and do things like that. Because, I mean, if you have a player like that, you always have a chance, right? And when Michi gets it going, he's pretty hard to stop, and he's having a really great year. Again, I think this guy is going to be an all-SEC player. Whenever that gets announced here, I think it's this week, and then we'll see what happens from there. I mean, look, I think a lot of the guys on this team, I think it also helps from the standpoint of they are an older team. Half the guys on their team are playing. They're potentially playing their final game of their careers on Wednesday. So I think they're going to give it all they got, and games like this can definitely help with that.
We'll take a look at the bracket for the SEC men's tournament, as well as the latest bracketology on the men's side of things, as well as we creep closer to the start of the NCAA tournament. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri with you on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri on your Monday here on The Game. A reminder, coming up on Friday, April 3rd at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. We'll be there for the Spring Golf Classic. Saki's Morning Libations Bar will be providing the beverages. Onion sausages will be provided by the Lexington Gamecock Club, and the Golf Gun also makes its return, so we hope to see you out there if you want to take part. $400 per team. Give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to sign up. As we mentioned earlier, Jack's got a very busy week as he'll be up in Nash Vegas for the SEC tournament, at least as long as South Carolina is going to be there. Fortunately for you, I guess, you don't have to worry about getting there super early because Carolina and Oklahoma going to be playing a late game. It has a projected start time of 9:30. I'm going to assume that's probably going to be closer to like a 9:45 or a 9:50 because you're assuming Ole Miss and Texas go off without a hitch and they can wrap their game up at 9 o'clock. But as we know, college basketball rarely gets played within a 2-hour window, so expect it to be a very late night out there in Nashville.
I hate to say it, guys. I would have rather had the noon game.
I was kind of hoping for that, honestly. Now, that would have meant Carolina would have been 16th overall.
They would have lost on Saturday.
They would have lost on Saturday.
If they would have lost, that they would have automatically been the 16th seed. But even the 15, I would have taken because that is a 7 o'clock game. But man, yeah, it is going to be a very late night, especially if South Carolina loses on Wednesday, whenever they lose, because even if they won on Wednesday against Oklahoma and then have to play Thursday and then lose, like they're automatically playing the latest game of the night for the first 2 days, and then we'll see what happens with quarterfinals on Friday and all that. But yeah, it's going to be a late night on Wednesday, especially if they lose, just because it's like you're getting all your season wrap up stuff done, and then I'm traveling. You know, I'm on the road the next day, so it's really like. It's going to be I'm going to be up into the early hours of the morning, man. So you may not hear from me the next hour radio, but we'll see.
By the way, if they made it to Thursday, they would also still play at 9:30.
Yes,
because that would be against Arkansas. It wouldn't be until Saturday into the semis that they would possibly play an earlier game.
Yeah. So the route is currently. So I think you're right. It's Oklahoma to start. They would play the winner. They'd play Texas A&M, and then they would have to play Arkansas in the quarters.
Correct, because Arkansas is the third overall seed with a double bye.
Yes, so get to Arkansas if you can, but yeah, I think more importantly than anything, you got to take care of business on Wednesday against Oklahoma.
Well, and here's the thing. This is an Oklahoma team that they beat earlier on in the season. Now, do I expect Carolina to go on a miraculous 5-win and 5-day run? Absolutely not. I think they could possibly win against Oklahoma. I think they'd probably lose to A&M, so I don't see them getting any farther than the second round of this thing. But there is something to be said about a team that you already beat once earlier on this year, seeing them in the first round.
Yeah, I think here's the thing. The reason why it's better to be the higher seed than it would have been to be as much as I would have loved seeing this team just play at noon and just get it done with. I think they have a better chance now because they are playing a favorable matchup. Now, just because you beat a team earlier in the year does not mean anything for this. Go back to last year. South Carolina had just beaten Arkansas like a week and a half earlier. Killed them. Like it was like a 20-point blowout win in Columbia. And then about a week later, they go to Nashville and they lose by 4, I believe, to Arkansas the first round of the SEC tournament. So whatever happened before has no relevance to now, especially since it's been almost 2 months since then. But I will say, South Carolina played so well in that game that you can't help but feel decent in this game. But the thing is, Oklahoma's playing a lot better. They've won, I believe it's 6 of their final 8 games here. They just beat Texas in overtime. Oklahoma's 18-14 right now. So when you look at where they are in the not just the SEC, but like in terms of the NCAA tournament standing, I would say they probably need to win. They definitely need to win on Wednesday for sure. A loss, I think, would kill their chances of making the tournament. But if they win on Wednesday, I almost feel like Oklahoma's a pretty safe bet to make it to the NCAA tournament just because they have the 7 conference wins. They have a winning 18-14. They've turned their season around. Like, it's going to be a tough game on Wednesday, but I think South Carolina's got a nice chance here to not just play spoiler, but, get a good win.
By the way, did you see how Oklahoma nearly blew it against Texas over the weekend?
I did. I was keeping up on my phone and just keeping track of the score, really. I see it's like, I think it was like a 4-point game with like 3 seconds left, and I'm like, oh, they're going to win. And then it's like, oh, wait, Texas is shooting 3 free throws, and it's like, oh, yeah, they tie the game going to overtime. I'm like, oh, my gosh. Because I was not feeling great after the doubleheader. I was feeling tired and sick after that game. And then, I'm like getting my story written. I pre-write for this whenever the tournament's going to be announced or whatever, and trying to figure out if it's Auburn or Oklahoma, and Auburn's getting killed, and then Oklahoma's winning. I'm like trying to figure it all out, but yeah, Oklahoma wins that game in the end.
Yeah, they fouled 2 Texas shooters on threes within like the final 30 seconds when they were up by 5 or 6, and that obviously sent the game to overtime. They were able to hang on for the win on the road there at Texas, but yeah, they were almost my who sprung a leak this week if they would have blown that. We'll get to that coming up here in a minute, by the way, but you're right. This is going to be a very important week for the SEC in terms of how many teams they can get in. As of right now, per Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology, 11 SEC teams in as of right now. The most controversial one in the SEC that's still on the outside, currently in per Joe Lunardi's bracketology, is Auburn. He has them as the last team in as of right now. Now, here's the thing. They benefited because they lost over the weekend to Alabama, but they benefited from just about everybody else losing that was in the bubble conversation. I mean, Virginia Tech, Missouri, SMU, UCF, California, Texas, Southern Cal, Indiana, all the other teams around the bubble also lost. So it's kind of a moot point for Auburn, but they probably, as we talked about the other day, need to win a game, maybe 2, to feel good about their chances of making the tournament.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that Auburn is viewed so highly just because I really don't think they've been that great this year. Yes, they have, I think, the win of the year going to Florida and winning that game, but if you're Auburn, realistically, they probably need to win what, Tyler? Probably 2 games in Nashville to feel comfortable about making the tournament?
Yeah, considering the second game would be against Tennessee, that'd obviously be a good quality win for them. Beat Mississippi State in the opening round probably doesn't do much for you. I think safely 2 wins is probably enough.
I would say so. And considering they're playing on day 1 of the tournament, too, and look, I mean, they had a really nice opportunity to get a win over Alabama on Saturday. That would have probably easily put them into the tournament, regardless of really what happens here this upcoming week. But, yeah, now they're in a position where, because they are playing on day 1, they really probably need to win. Yeah, 2 games feels about right. And even then, I mean, it may not be comfortable because depending on what bids get stolen around the rest of the league, that's the other thing to consider here. Like, there's going to be, we're already seeing it in some of the mid-major tournaments, like Northern Iowa winning their conference tournament as a 6th seed, and a lot of number 1 seeds going down across the country in these conference tournaments. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how many bid stealers there are out there, because then that takes away at-large bids from some of these other teams out there.
Yeah, I've enjoyed, and I love the way that it works out where most of the mid-majors are playing their conference tournaments this weekend as opposed to next weekend when the SEC, Big Ten, and all the other ones are taking place, because I got the chance to kind of bounce around and watch a couple of the different teams punch their tickets to the tournament yesterday, and obviously still got some going on through today and tomorrow as well, I believe. Yeah, looking at this, got the SWAC is starting, the CAA is getting into its semifinals. You got a lot of games still going on here to see who's going to be punching their tickets early to the NCAA tournament. And this is the best time of year. We've gotten some buzzer beaters. Boston U and Navy over the weekend had a crazy ending to that game.
Crazy game.
This is the funnest time of year for college basketball, and it's getting off to a good start.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching the games this week. Not just I'm going to go check out some of these other games of the SEC tournament just because of how late South Carolina is playing. Like, it's going to be interesting to watch what happens in this tournament, but also just around the country. I mean, there's going to be – I think this is just as fun as what you're getting here with the first weekend of March Madness here next week. I mean, this is going to be an awesome week, especially if it's anything like what we saw this past week with some of these conference tournaments getting going. There's going to be a handful of big upsets, and I'm looking forward to seeing which teams can really start their Cinderella runs this weekend. We'll see if the Gamecocks are one of them. Not likely, but who knows?
Obviously, a big week for college basketball as we get set for the NCAA tournament. Also, the second week of spring practice. We'll talk some more spring storylines coming up next as we continue on with the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry along with you here on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher with you here on your Monday on the Game. We'll get into some football stuff in just a moment, but first, it's time for Who Sprung the Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. Number 4 UConn was on the road at Marquette, wrapping up their regular season, trying to match St. John's for the best record of 18-2 in Big East play, but they fall 68-62 to the Golden Eagles, who are well under 500 in Big East play this year before heading into their tournament. But the moment everybody's talking about, Dan Hurley ejected with like half a second to go in the game as he tried to argue a foul call, what he thought a foul should have been called on Silas Demery Jr. Doesn't get called, and again, Marquette goes on to win the game. The debate is, did he touch the official? Did he not touch the official? The Big East did fine him $25,000 for unsportsmanlike conduct. And, Jack, this is a classic example of, I don't know if he touched the official or not, but when you're Dan Hurley and you have antics that follow you the way that they do, you're going to lose the benefit of the doubt just about every single time.
Is there a bigger loser, like a bigger sore loser in sports than Dan Hurley?
Matt Cronin's giving him a run for his money right now.
Mick Cronin, yeah, from UCLA, yeah, he's bad too. This guy, I mean, I feel like every clip I see of this guy, he's so arrogant. He's such an unlikable guy that it's like you hate that he's a good coach and has won national championships just because of just how much of a problem he is. And it's just antics like this that aren't the least bit surprising. And look, I get heat of the moment, sure, but I mean, you can't be going all up in the ref's face and whatnot and losing your cool. And yeah, the debate of did he touch him or not, it kind of looked like he did bump into him a little bit, but of course Hurley's not going to say that was the case after the game. Why would he ever admit to being wrong? That's just not who he is.
Well, it's one of those things, like if Lamont Paris was in the same situation, I feel like people give him a little bit more grace. Like, it's Lamont Paris. He doesn't usually lose his mind. But Dan Hurley, it's like, yeah, he lost his mind. He yelled at the official and probably touched him too. So, again, and look, $25,000 is no skin off his bones. He can cover that. But, yeah, him and Cronin are definitely up there as two of the worst losers, not only in men's college basketball, but in all of sports right now.
Yeah, especially those two are just, my gosh, it's bad.
Again, the Big East tournament gets rolling a little bit later on this week. Believe that UConn will have a double bye in that, if I'm remembering their bracket correctly.
They should, because they would, I guess, be the 2 seed then, just because.
Well, I can't remember how many. The different tournaments have different sets of buys and stuff like that. But, yeah, they're the 2 seed behind St. John's. So they'll get to wait a couple days, and maybe Dan Hurley can cool off by then.
Oh, my gosh.
Probably not.
No, probably not.
It is obviously the second week of Gamecock football spring practice. Because they're on spring break, I do not believe we hear from Coach Beamer at all this week, correct?
Yep. No, to my knowledge, there's nothing this week. Like, it's on the official schedule. I'm more so trying to recall if there is any practice this week. I think the team's just off this week, and then it's back to everything next week.
Okay, so nothing at all happening this week then.
Yeah. On the schedule, like it says, like March 7th to the 15th or whatever it is, that there's just like nothing this week. So
it is weird. Why wouldn't you just start spring practice the week after then?
See, that's what I'm trying to think of here. I don't know why you wouldn't, but I don't know, honestly. It's kind of strange because it's like there's no spring game, so you really could have made. I don't know, but again, I wonder how long ago they were trying to put together this little spring fest thing they were doing. It feels like they've probably been working on it for a little bit now, before the spring practice calendar was eventually revealed. So yeah, I don't know. It's a little weird, but oh well.
Yeah. So we'll see. Again, because we'll hear from Beamer next week, Pro Days next week. So we got a lot of things certainly going on. And God, you just hope you stop hearing about injuries, right? I was talking to one of my neighbors yesterday who hadn't seen it in a couple days, but he's like, dude, the injuries, man, what's happening? I'm like, it's football, man. It's how it happens. And unfortunately, it's been 2 that affect one specific position group on the offensive line with Peake and Josiah Thompson. But, yeah, if we can go through the rest of spring without any injuries at all, certainly without any major injuries, I think we can consider that a win at this point.
That'd be nice. But, yeah, it is. Again, it is strange because it's like we just started spring practice last week. We have nothing this week. and then it's back to everything. Like next Monday, we're talking to Clayton White and Kendall Briles. Like there's a lot going on, so it's going to be it's a little weird that there's just like this little dead space in between everything. But yeah, once we get back here next week, it'll be full speed ahead on those next few weeks until April 11th.
You mentioned Kendall Briles. Chris Lowe of On3 over the weekend put out his staff hires poised to make a major impact, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. Kendall Briles was the featured name on that list for South Carolina. I feel like that is probably the biggest overarching narrative about South Carolina this offseason outside of this bubble, because we focus on it more specifically, and we're talking about the running back room, we're talking about the edge room, offensive line, but I think from a national standpoint, everybody's looking at it saying, okay, Beamer, you finally hired an offensive coordinator that people thought was good, or at least had a better track record coming in. Let's see what you can do with them. And I feel like Kendall Briles will be really the talk of Carolina this offseason outside of the Columbia bubble.
Yeah, no, he definitely will be. And there was that video that the media team, the creative team at South Carolina released last week, just a quick little 30-second video of Briles at practice and whatnot. And I think a lot of people reacted the way I'm about to, of just like, it's a breath of fresh air seeing a young offensive coordinator that runs a college offense just being really, not just that, but just being really energetic during practice, getting involved. Like, I think there was a clip of him just like lining up at defensive end, like, simulating through practice, going up against these guys. Like, it was cool to see. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, the results need to be there on the field, of course, with points and whatnot. But at the very least, it just feels like a different sense of energy with the offensive coordinator here.
You're telling me that Mike Shula wasn't a high energy guy at practice when you saw him last year?
The guy wouldn't reveal anything. He was the most mellow, just kind of chill, not wanting to talk too much type of guy in those press conference settings. I mean,
but I mean, like at practice, what was he like when he's like out there with the players?
Definitely not like that.
Okay,
definitely not like that.
What about Dow? Dow was a little.
Dow
had some energy.
Dow was like, he's the in between. I feel like, right? He's not like this stickler. It's gonna be like, I'm not telling you anything, but he'll talk. Like,
Dow loved to break things down.
Yeah. Do you know he coached in the NFL?
I'm aware. I always bring this up because he was really heavy about references early on in his time here at Carolina of Jay Cutler and Ryan Tannehill and God, who did he work with when he was in Cleveland? Not Manziel, but whoever the other quarterback was.
Yeah,
there at that point in time. But he always loved to drop names when you guys would talk to him. And as it got towards the end of his time here at Carolina, it became more general, like in the NFL type things, and less of more like, here's this specific person, specific example, which I always found kind of funny. But yeah, which, I mean, hey, that's what the majority of his coaching career was. So you're not going to have to worry about that with Kendall Briles. No NFL experience here.
Yeah, no, which is, look, it's different, right? It definitely is different because the offensive system that they're going to be running is going to be far different than the Shula one. I'm sure the Dowell one. Like, there may be, what's the best word to like put it here? Like, there may be little pieces of what they ran in the past in this offense still, because it's Beamer at the top at the end of the day. But yeah, this is going to be Briles' system, and I think a lot of folks are really looking forward to just seeing not just a difference in what this offense can be, but just also a better, more efficient offense, not running the ball every single first down and becoming predictable, and then throwing a short pass on second down and then running it again on third down. Like, having some different flavor on offense, I think, is going to be, we'll use this word a lot, a breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's why it's kind of a bummer that we're not going to have a spring game. And I get it. The offense would have been very basic, very vanilla. But just seeing even a bare bones element of what this offense is intriguing to me, that unfortunately we're all going to have to wait until September to truly see in action. Because, again, we've been begging for a college-specific type of offense. We finally got it. And I can't wait to see all these guys, be a part of it.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see.
Have your notifications stopped from your offensive line drill video
yet? Yes, they have stopped. Me and Preston were talking about that earlier. It's just, again, not to beat the dead horse here, but it was so silly, just how many people are overreacting over the first day of practice. I feel like I should have put a disclaimer in that video of like, hey, like, it's the first day of practice, mind you. But, like, I didn't expect that video to get freaking million views. I was expecting maybe a couple hundred, maybe 1,000. Like, it was just so silly, just how many different people were trying to. Yeah, it got to that point, like we said last week, where literal NFL guys are just in there giving their 2 cents on it. Like, anyone and everyone that has ever been involved with the offensive line in some capacity, whether you played, coached, heck, even watched an offensive line, has an opinion on it. It was crazy.
Again, I'm waiting for the first SEC game against Mississippi State where somebody gives up a pressure or a sack, and people are like, see, it's that dumb drill they were doing back in the spring. They didn't prepare them well enough.
No.
You know it's coming.
Oh, yeah, of course. People probably have it ready in their Twitter drafts right now of, like, ready to send as soon as things go bad.
We'll come back, wrap up the hour, revisit our headlines from over the weekend, as well as tell you about a new sport I learned about yesterday. It is the extra point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Velcher with you here on your Monday on the Game. We'll revisit our future headlines coming up in just a moment. But, Jack, I discovered a new sport that I didn't know existed over the weekend.
Okay.
Yesterday, of course, South Carolina and Texas were getting set to play the SEC Women's Tournament Final that was supposed to tip off around 3 o'clock on ESPN. Well, as we always know, college basketball games typically don't stay within their 2-hour window, so the ACC title game ran long, which, and you're watching that, you see the little yellow graphic at the bottom that South Carolina and Texas will start on ESPN News. Okay, flip it over there, watch the first, 5 or so minutes of South Carolina and Texas, and when they got in their first media timeout, they switched back over to ESPN. Well, I didn't switch the channel immediately, and instead of going into a commercial on ESPN News, it went directly into pillow fighting championships. Did you know this was a thing, Jack? Are you familiar with the PFC,
No.
the Pillow Fighting Championship League?
No, I'm not.
This is professional pillow fighting under kind of the guise of MMA, and I've been fascinated by this since I learned about this yesterday, but it's essentially, it was created during COVID as a family-friendly alternative to UFC where there's not blood and super violence. They have these 3.5-pound bags, essentially. They're the pillows, and you fight by swinging these things at each other, and you get points depending on where you strike your opponent and all that kind of stuff, and if you knock them down. I never would have guessed pillow fighting would legitimately be an extreme sport, but here we are.
Interesting.
I mean, I didn't sit there and watch the whole fight. I took a minute before I had to flip back over to the Carolina game, but I was like, yeah, pillow fighting championships, just when you think you've seen it all.
Huh. Man, it's crazy. So how did your headline go this week?
Well,
let's hear it.
My headline was that it was very specific that Kim Mulkey was going to get a technical foul on herself against Carolina. Maybe I predicted that for the wrong coach because Dan Hurley ended up getting that against Marquette. But I kind of saw something similar with Kim Mulkey, she blew up on an official, touch him or something like that. She get teed up herself. Didn't happen. There was a lot of frustration. There was assistant coaches being, getting hands shoved away and stuff like that on Saturday in that game between South Carolina and LSU. But give Kim Mulkey credit. She did not get herself teed up.
No, she actually handled everything, I think, surprisingly well. I thought she was going to blow some steam off at the end, especially in that press conference. But no, I was listening to her. She sounded, she gave a lot of credit to South Carolina. And at some point, I don't want to say it's just set in for her that South Carolina has just owned her since she became the head coach at LSU, but it's been dominant to say the least.
Let South Carolina eliminate them from the tournament this year, and then you'll see her blow a gasket.
Yeah. So if they do end up facing off again, which I love to see, I think that'd be awesome for everyone. But that'd be worth the price of admission right there.
How about your headline?
Yeah. So my headline was that the Team USA in the World Baseball Classic was going to rule Brazil and Great Britain, two teams that unsurprisingly are now eliminated from WBC contention. I was close, but not close enough. So game one, USA wins 15-5, and you'd be like, oh, well, they won by 10 runs. Isn't that a run rule? No. So they did it in 9 innings, so it was not a run rule. And then on Saturday, they won 9-1 over Great Britain. So 2 blowout wins, just not run rule wins. But, yeah, the USA just dominated. Aaron Judge looked pretty good. How about that home run by Kyle Schwarber on Saturday? I mean, USA was down 1-0 to Great Britain going into the middle innings until a 5-run 5th inning just really catapulted them to victory.
I did find the Great Britain blew another lead to America. Joke's pretty funny over the weekend.
Yeah.
It's also really funny, too, that, and we only do this every couple of years, but certain countries like Great Britain, well, there's not a rich amount of talent specifically from Britain playing in Major League Baseball right now, so they go to areas of they're allowed to pull from areas of the world that Britain occupies, like the Bahamas and stuff like that. Like Jazz Chisholm was able to play for them, but it is really funny to kind of see some of the makeups of these teams, even though technically Jazz Chisholm isn't from Great Britain, but he was allowed to play on the Britain team.
All you need is some sort of family connection. There's a lot of guys that have no ties, from their own self to these countries, but it's oh yeah, their mother was born there or they have a grandparent from there. I think that's the qualifications you need. But Dude, the WBC has been awesome so far. Like, USA's handling their business. Like, today's slate might be the best so far. You get Cuba going up against Puerto Rico tonight, and then the big game I think that everyone's going to be probably tuned in on is Mexico taking on the U.S. tonight, 8 p.m. Paul Skeens pitching, and Mexico's looked really good so far. And, dude, I mean, the WBC, again, just been awesome so far. Saturday was really cool in particular because you got the 2 walk-off home runs, something that's surprisingly never happened before in the WBC's history. Ozzie Albies hitting that 3-run homer for Netherlands with the arguably – did you hear the home run call?
I did.
Oh, my gosh. That was just to take the lead. Like, that was arguably the worst – call I've heard. And then Puerto Rico walking it off in 10 innings over Panama. So really fun WBC so far. I mean, if you're not watching, you're totally missing out.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Again, tonight, America taking on Mexico at 8 o'clock on Fox. How many more pool games do they have?
So there are 2 more pool games. Things should be wrapped up, I think, by Wednesday.
Okay, Italy tomorrow night, and then...
Yeah, and then that'll be it for the U.S.
That's it for the U.S., and then you get into the proper bracket for this upcoming weekend. It's already got Korea and Japan in one quarterfinal. I believe America, if they keep winning, would play Friday at 8 o'clock again.
Yeah, if the U.S. beats Mexico tonight, they should. The winner of tonight's game between Mexico and U.S. should most likely be in good position to qualify for making the quarterfinals and moving on to the next round. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. That game is going to be awesome tonight. I mean, the crowd in Houston for that Mexico game yesterday, they were playing. It was Brazil last night where they won like 15-0. It was or 16-0. It was ridiculous how loud that crowd was there. So it's going to be a good time tonight seeing that unfold.
Again, that matchup tonight at 8 o'clock on Fox. We'll talk about that some coming up tomorrow. We'll get back into what happened with women's basketball at the top of the next hour as we get into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on your Monday on the Game. 11 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyrod West Mitchell and Chris Clark along with you here. Coming off the heels of a very busy weekend across all South Carolina sports. And unfortunately, guys, we kind of expect to be talking about a South Carolina women's tournament championship, but that wasn't in the cards as the women fall yesterday to Texas in the finals, 78-61, a game that got off on the bad foot for Carolina, get down 14-0 early, ton of turnovers, didn't get a whole lot of shots off, and when you spot a team like Texas 14 points, that's going to be very hard to overcome, and unfortunately for Dawn Staley's team, they weren't able to do that.
Hard for anybody to overcome, you're right. Watching the opening, there were several spots that just stood out, and that was the biggest one just to open the game. You know, there are a lot of teams out there that, first of all, South Carolina doesn't get down 14-0. You don't get down. Dawn Staley's team doesn't get down 2 touchdowns at the beginning of the game to anybody. They don't get down in general, right, by that margin at any point. But to start the game, you know, Texas was swarming defensively. I think Carolina turned the ball over 5 times very early. And in that same stretch, Texas made their first, I think, 6 shots. And so you're down 14-0. There are other teams that South Carolina, if they would have had that random bad stretch for whatever reason, could have overcome it. Against Texas, not that easy, right? Because they're really, as we know, we've seen these two teams play. All the players talked about it and have talked about it really after all the games in this series. They know each other so well. They know the personnel. They know each other's plays. And really it's about execution. And South Carolina didn't execute as well in the early part of the game. Some of those things improved as time went on, but I think you tip your hat to Texas. You know, defensively they played very well. They were making shots. They were even making some outside shots, which is not a big part of their game. And I kind of got the feel as this thing went on, guys, even after South Carolina made a few runs here and there, Texas it seemed like they always would be able to slam the door and kind of prevent that run from turning into an even bigger run, a 10-0 run, a 12-0 run by South Carolina. They were able to kind of prevent that. And so, you know, hat tip to them. I think they showed a stat during the broadcast. I think it was something like, first of all, it would have been the biggest comeback in women's basketball in South Carolina history by that margin, I think they said. Maybe it was the halftime deficit or maybe it was in general. And then Vic Schaefer's teams, when they're up by, 17, which they were, haven't lost, you know. And so those things make it really tough against that level of competition.
Yeah, I kept waiting on the big run, and every single time Texas slammed the door, you know, as Vic Schaefer has told us many times, that's a home game for South Carolina. So I kept thinking, well, maybe if they can, you know, get this thing back to single digits, get the crowd going. I mean, even as good as Texas is, this South Carolina, I won't just say team, the program in general throughout the Dawn Staley era, especially maybe the last 4 or 5 years, and they've been a little bit more offensive-oriented overall, they can score in a flash. So I kept waiting on, you know, does Tessa hit a couple of threes back-to-back? They get a couple of steals and, you know, get 4 easy points and just kind of take a big chunk out of that thing. I kept thinking, man, if they can get a big chunk out of it before it gets to like winning time, the final 3 or 4 minutes, where then it becomes a free throw shooting contest, a turnover fest, like who protects the ball better. Maybe they got a shot at this thing. But ultimately, that early deficit that South Carolina was facing was kind of the number that I felt like they were bouncing. You know, there'd be like a 4 or 5 point stretch for Carolina where they'd kind of chip into it, and then Texas would answer and extend it back out to, you know, 15, 17, 19, something like that. So they never really could. Like, the rest of the game actually played out fairly evenly for both teams, I feel like. But that initial cushion, Texas was just able to ride that all the way to the end. You know, Madison Booker had 18 points, but really it was everybody else on the Texas team early on. I feel like that. I mean, how many different times did they pop up? You know, this player is averaging this season or in the tournament, but she's got 10 more points than that today. Like it was the perfectly played game for Texas and South Carolina. It felt like there's a little bit, I don't really know how to describe it. Early on, it was like they weren't panicking. South Carolina was not panicking at all, but also it was almost like there needed to be a little bit more sense of urgency early on when Texas was going on that run. And so they couldn't really get that run stopped. Then Texas is like, well, hey, we did this without Madison Booker. We're going to lean on her a little bit more in the second half. And just very clearly was not South Carolina's day. I won't make an excuse, but it almost felt like from an energy standpoint that yesterday against LSU was South Carolina's championship. And it just felt, or excuse me, the day before, it just felt like Sunday's game. I don't know, man. Watching on TV, it just felt a little different from an energy standpoint.
Yeah, and Texas played the later game on Saturday, but more of a routine win there against Ole Miss. They didn't have to expel quite as much energy, though, again, I think playing later, that balances out a little bit. But you're right. Even when Carolina would go on short runs and to get it down to 9 points, the differential a couple times there in the second quarter, Texas would answer back immediately. So there wasn't that magical run, and I'm with you guys because we've gotten so conditioned to seeing this. Carolina's been in plenty of games. I've gotten down at points, but you're waiting, all right, third quarters where they're going to lock in. They're going to hold Texas to like 8 points, and they're going to score 22 themselves. They're going to grab a ton of rebounds, make all the free throws, and that just didn't happen. And free throws were actually one of the big points from yesterday because Carolina did get to the line a lot. I know there was some controversy in the officiating, but Carolina got to the line 23 times yesterday and missed 11 of those shots. Now, again, even having those 11 points, that doesn't win you the game, but it makes the game a whole lot different if you're able to make most of those down the stretch there. So that's an area certainly that came back to bite them there. Got beaten off the glass. Texas is a bigger team. We've seen that for a lot of these games that Carolina's been in tight or lost this year where they're just kind of outsized by a team, and that reared its ugly head once again yesterday. So now they kind of get set for the NCAA tournament with some concerns certainly, but again, I think we still give them the benefit of the doubt because they've proven time and time again, as Don Staley alluded to after the game yesterday, hey, last time we lost this game, Kentucky back in 2022 in the tournament final, we won the national championship. So no reason to panic, but it's just it's a bummer to not be able to see them win yet another SEC women's tournament title as we were expecting them to do over the weekend.
Yeah, it's such a high standard that, it's obviously disappointing, but that would have been the, fourth in a row if they had won it. This is a program that's shown that, you don't go, hey, Texas is just, it's not a situation where like LSU has this bugaboo of South Carolina. They cannot get over that hump. At some point they will.
Sure.
I don't think that Kim Mulkey's going to be at LSU for however long she's going to be and never beat South Carolina. It might happen. You might say, well, the evidence is she's not, right? At some point, as good as they are, South Carolina may have an off night or LSU may just be a little bit better one night and they may win, right? This is not that situation because, for a long time, the narrative and the evidence was, when Vic Schaefer was Mississippi State and then when he gets to Texas, can't beat Dawn, right? And he's been able to do it a few times now. But South Carolina has proven that they can beat Texas and vice versa. South Carolina's still been on the right side of that rivalry a little bit more than not. I think South Carolina, when they are playing well, has shown that they can pretty much beat anybody. They haven't matched up against UConn this year, but they've matched up against a lot of the best programs in the country because they schedule very difficult and they play in a great women's basketball league. So concerns, yeah, there are some, right? But this is a team that hasn't lost a lot of basketball games. And to go back to the game yesterday, I think there was a point in the game that just, I think it kind of summed it up, right? So later in the game, and you might not have been super high on South Carolina's chances to come back at this point, but Texas makes a shot. They get a technical foul. And you're going, all right, well, maybe, you get 2 free throws, you get the ball back. We'll see. You never know. Late in the game, McKeer, pretty good free throw shooter, misses both. Then South Carolina gets the ball back, immediately throw it away. And so it was just kind of that type of game. I thought Texas, to your point, Wes, they were really good on the boards. Normally you're out there watching, and even if South Carolina is missing some shots that they typically make, and there were several of those instances, you can normally bank on, okay, they'll get an offensive rebound and get some more opportunities here. They'll own the boards. Texas, we know, is a challenge on that front. They have games, they've had games in the past where they've out-rebounded South Carolina. This time I thought they were a little bit better on the board. Some of that's the way the ball bounces. Some of it's just, really good effort and just winning the basketball a little bit more. So are there some things, can you see a path where, hey, if South Carolina plays a certain way, could they, not make the Final Four, get bounced in the tournament? Yeah, you can see that. But this is also a team at the same time, while they're not invincible, as we saw yesterday, you can also look at this thing and say there's still very much a path for this team to make a deep, deep run or even win it all. I mean, I haven't seen anything this season where you go, I just don't think South Carolina can win this thing. I still very much feel that way going into it.
Well, they may very well see Texas again, in the big tournament. So that wouldn't be a shock at all to me if they met again at the Final Four. And, I was thinking of that exact sequence where, Texas gets called for that technical, and you're going, all right, they really just need like a 5-point possession at this point. They need to hit both of the Tech shots, and then they need to hit a 3-pointer and really make that burn for Texas. And they didn't get a single point out of it. There was another situation. I think Latson missed 2 free throws in a row in the second half when she's a very good free throw. There were just multiple times where you were like, is this just not their day? And Raven from really very early in the game was kind of getting treatment or stretched out over on the side. They even mentioned on the broadcast, like, she played a lot of lockdown defense the night before. It kind of felt like she was not quite 100%. They were even, they were letting Mouse run the offense, even, keeping Raven on the court, but they were letting Mouse run the offense early on. It seemed like they were just kind of trying to maybe keep the sprints off of Raven's legs as much as possible. And so there was just a lot that went against them. The whole time you're going, well, I mean, I was sitting there still thinking South Carolina may win the game just because it's South Carolina women's basketball. I was like, this thing is far from over, regardless of how this thing started. But credit to Texas, they kept doing their thing. There were some standout moments. Alicia, I thought, played maybe her best game. But I also thought early on, some of South Carolina's bigs just seemed to maybe let the moment get to them just a little bit. I don't know if there was some extra nerves in the game. I don't know what it was, but just very, very lots of uncharacteristic things from South Carolina in this game. But hey, you use it, you learn from it, you move on, you get some little bit of rest, and then you're right back out there.
We'll get into what Dawn Staley's message to her team after the game was, as well as start to look ahead to next week's NCAA tournament coming up as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls along here on the game.
Yeah, I mean, our team knows we didn't play our best basketball, not nearly what we're capable of doing, and told them that the last time we lost in this situation, we won the national championship. So you got to think about that. It might be the very thing this team needs. It's not what I would think, yesterday coming in today, but now that we're here and it's a reality, you search for things that have a connection that can give your team what it needs to make this run for a national championship. I do think we have enough in the room to do that. We'll rest and recoup at the end of the month, at the end of the week, and start that journey.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris with you here on your Monday on the Game. Dawn Staley talking about the message to her team after only their third loss of the season, this time for the second time at the hands of the Texas Longhorns, so they lost to back on Thanksgiving night as well. And again, we don't get to talk about losses for this team a whole lot, but when we do, we typically talk about it being kind of the fuel for them to kind of readjust and play their best basketball going forward. And that's typically what you see. Went on a long winning streak after they lost that game to Texas at the end there on Thanksgiving. Obviously lost the game a couple weeks back to Oklahoma as well, but have been pretty much flawless in conference play since then, beating opponents pretty handily. And again, you're going to get a couple of extra days off between this loss and starting the NCAA tournament. But again, it wouldn't shock anybody if South Carolina is hoisting a national championship trophy a month from now, though you're going to have to, depending on how the bracket shakes out, possibly see an LSU again, maybe see an Oklahoma, Texas, UConn, UCLA. It's not going to be easy by any means, so this tournament could really go either way for this team. But again, you put faith in Dawn Staley that her teams typically are able to react well to these kind of things, and we'll see what happens coming up here in about a week and a half.
Well, and I think one thing to look at, and this was talked about a lot during the broadcast, is Charlie Cream's projections in terms of what does this mean for Texas, South Carolina, the rest of the field. And, the Gamecocks won the league by, 2 games. They're thought of as a strong 1 seed, but this does have an effect on your overall, seeding and where you may go. And so Texas was playing not just for the SEC tournament championship, but an opportunity to be the number 3 overall team, which then means Texas, and of course this is not official, these are projections, but probably pretty good projections. Texas would be allowed to be placed in one of the Fort Worth regionals, and then South Carolina would have to go to Sacramento, California. And so for Texas, I guess Vic Schaefer might be happy. This could be not it'd be a home game, and just like a home series, a home tournament, just like South Carolina has in the SEC tournament, for instance, because they're playing 200 miles away, from Austin. So, if you're South Carolina, not only would you have loved to win the SEC tournament again, but you would have loved to have the opportunity to play, Texas is not your home base, but it is a little bit closer. It's not all the way across the country.
It's more feasible to get more fans there. Obviously, it's easier to travel on your team and stuff like that. And look, Carolina's not a stranger to being sent all over the country, so I don't think that'll be a detriment, but it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out, and okay, are you going to be paired with, assuming you make it through your bracket, a UConn or a UCLA in the Final Four if you get that far? Again, it really just kind of it really kind of shakes out with how things go towards the back end as you get towards the national championship, but still a number 1 seed nonetheless.
And if all this played out, like if everything that Charlie Cream is saying plays out, then I believe the soonest that South Carolina would match up with Texas would be in the national championship game.
I believe so, because they'd be on opposite sides. If I'm reading this correctly, this would have them, if all the number 1 seeds were chalk, you'd be at UConn in the Final Four, and then Texas or UCLA in the national championship.
That'd be juicy.
It's not going to be easy by any means.
Nah. Not easy for anybody playing the Gamecocks either.
Yeah, I mean, guys, don't y'all think, though, if you look at those 4, like UConn, South Carolina, Texas, UCLA, I mean, those are all 4 pretty strong 1 seeds. Like, I don't know necessarily, I mean, of course it matters, but I don't know if it matters a ton in terms of when you face those teams. Like, you're going to have to go, point being, if you're going to win the national title, I think you're probably going to have to go through two of those teams to do it regardless. Maybe there's an upset along the way. I know there's been maybe a little bit more parity in the tournament recently. It used to kind of feel like the men's tournament would be just craziness, and then the women's tournament would be, hey, the top 5 or 6 teams are going to make it to the very, very end every single year, it feels like. So those are all capable of winning it all, 1 seeds. And, I think South Carolina certainly could do it. I think certainly, are you going to be surprised if they get to the Final Four and then don't win it? No, I don't think that's surprising either. I think this is a Final Four quality South Carolina team. Again, that's just kind of what they do, guys. Like they just get to the Final Four with the way this thing is built right now. Now, once you get there, you're facing, regardless of how this, flip a coin, regardless of how it is structured, you're going to face a couple of teams. If you win in the Final Four and make it to the championship, you're going to be facing 2 teams that are very capable of beating you, or in South Carolina's case, that you were capable of beating.
Have y'all looked at what UConn's done in there? What have they played? 2 games in the Big East tournament? 84-39 over Georgetown, 151 over Creighton, and they got Villanova tonight at 7. I mean, here's the thing: those are not Texas or LSU, obviously, but they're sitting there 33-0, undefeated. I mean, you're right, Wes. Like all those teams, like if you said Texas is going to win the national title, or UCLA, or UConn, or South Carolina, you're not going to be like, I'm shocked. They're all 1 seeds. They're all extremely strong. They all have something. They all have tons of strengths you can point out. It's hard to say that UConn has, a weakness. They've won every game that's been put in front of them. They've also beat a bunch of ranked teams by a ton. I mean, they beat Tennessee by 30 after being tied at the half. They beat Iowa by 26. They beat Southern Cal by 28. They had a close game with Michigan. They won by 3. Mm-hmm. But they've just their strength of schedule is not what South Carolina or several other teams is, but
they're beating the teams the way they should beat them.
Rolled over people all year.
Yeah.
So all the projected 1 seeds, very impressive.
Yeah. Hey, nobody ever said winning a national championship was easy, and it's certainly going to be difficult for Carolina this year. But again, when we've committed Don Staley for this being our best coaching job, for dealing with injuries and suspensions and players not being available left and right, and they've gotten to this point, and obviously they'll get a little bit of time off to rest and heal up before the tournament starts coming up at the end of next week. We'll learn about the specifics of the bracket coming up this weekend as well. We'll switch gears over to baseball coming up next, as it was a successful weekend over at Founders Park, and Gamecocks get a sweep of Princeton. We'll dive into that next here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark with you on your Monday here on the game. We finally had a winner for the Crescent Construction Grand Slam giveaway contest as Talmadge Leroy goes yard with the bases loaded last night to help South Carolina pick up the run roll victory in game number 3 against Princeton. That means somebody is going to win $425 thanks to our friends over at Crescent Construction. We'll announce that as the week goes along, but go back online to 1075thegame.com and register again for the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest. That will reset to $25 for tomorrow night's game against Citadel and go up by $25 each game until another Grand Slam is hit. And that Grand Slam last night was kind of the cherry on top of a successful weekend for South Carolina. 2 very competitive games on Saturday, but they find a way to pick up the win and then run rolling Princeton on Sunday 13-1 to sweep their first series of the season. They've won their past 5 straight since losing to Clemson. One more midweeker against Citadel tomorrow before they head into a very, very tough Gainesville this upcoming weekend against Florida.
You know, a positive because we went into, and you got to get through the Citadel game also, but in terms of what happened over the past week, you got to count it as a positive in a season that's had some negatives, losing against Clemson, losing, a few games to non-P4 schools that you'd love to have back, right? Look, what happened over the last few days is not going to bolster your resume, but it doesn't hurt it either. And this is a team that we all know needed to make some improvements in certain areas going into SEC play. Did this weekend tell us a lot? Did the last several games, that 5-game stretch, does it have us learn about this team? No. You've got to go into SEC play and let that play out. And what has happened earlier this season still happened. But look around the country at what happened this weekend. You're kind of glad that you did what you did. LSU, who was number 2, lost to what had been a bad Sacramento State team, lost that series. Tennessee's lost some games. Did Florida lose their series?
Yeah,
they salvaged one.
They dropped
on
the first 2
walk.
against High Point, and then High Point ran out of pitching yesterday, and it took 12 runs, but they did beat them in game 3.
Yeah, I think they brought back a guy after a rain delay, after 2 hours, brought back the same guy, won on a walk-off walk. So, Florida's not feeling great right now either, and obviously we'll see how both these teams feel, once they actually play this series. And we'll learn more and more about this team, this South Carolina team. But you're happy to have won these games. You're not throwing a party, you're not celebrating, but given what we've seen and given what's happened around the country with some of the early parity, you're happy to have won it. And I think there's a few nice storylines in there, too. It was good to see Leroy get the Grand Slam. Logan Sutter is heating up. I mean,
finally,
there are some positives in there.
Yeah, Sutter was on fire this week, and I think shows us that's the guy they recruited him to be. And, when you talk about some of the injuries they've had, Reese Moore being out, they're going to need Sutter to be what he was recruited to be. So I thought that was pretty big. They just got to figure out exactly how they're going to use him. Is he going to play second base? Is he going to just have to be a DH? How do you fit everybody in there? There were some things. I thought there were some signs here or there from Bo Hollins. Scobie had a good weekend, even though he was dealing with kind of being sick a little bit. You did this without Patrick Evans, who I think is a gamer. He's been dealing with an illness as well. So you obviously will hope that's not something that's going to kind of set him back going into SEC play. We'll see. But, we went in this stretch after the Clemson game, and I said, hey, man, they need to go 6-0. And I don't really care what it looks like, but you need to get there. You've taken care of business through the first 5. Now, you can't let up, I think, against the Citadel. But I do think there will be something to be said for if they can carry a little bit of momentum into this Florida series. And, you're going on the road. It's not going to be easy. But Florida, quite obviously, is not some unbeatable opponent. You just saw that it can be done. And I think you're starting to see maybe what this pitching staff could be when they're really going well. Josh Gunther wasn't quite what he was, obviously, against Clemson, but you know what he can do. And so I think you're starting to see a bullpen form that where you're going, okay, there might be some guys here. There might be some guys to work with here to where you can get through an SEC series and feel pretty good about it. You're starting to get some pitchers back healthy, it looks like, fairly soon too. So I don't know. I don't want to put too much into this. You were actually down in both games on Saturday, and we could be having a much different conversation about this. But instead, you found a way to win, and then you really did what you, I think, hoped you would do to Princeton in the first place on Sunday and just took it to them. Got a lot of guys in the game, had some innings where you scored with the long ball, had some innings where you scored without it, spread it around a little bit. Everybody got involved type thing. The Lee Croy home run was an opposite field shot. I thought that was good to see. Still some base running miscues here or there. I feel like they got to clean up if you're going to be a good team, right? But there are signs. There are signs. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but there are some signs.
Yeah, and look, we've I think have kind of talked about the pitching being the strength of this team early on this year. The offense has been kind of hit or miss, and hey, they went out there and scored a ton of runs this weekend. Again, a little bit of grain of salt because that is a team like Princeton. But hopefully, as the weather's warming up, certainly the ball's going to fly a little bit more. You hope the offense is starting to figure things out. And you're right. I am mildly concerned about some of the base running gaffes they've had, errors in the field, even things that don't count as errors where, ball off a glove or throws being low from shortstop and third base. Those are the kind of things that I think might be the difference once you get into conference play. Hopefully you can clean those up between now and, obviously this weekend against Florida, next weekend against Arkansas and stuff like that because, again, your margin for error is going to be razor thin at that point in time. So you're not perfect by any means. You are seeing improvements, which that's at this point kind of all you can ask for.
That's all you can ask for. Are you going to have to clean those things up? Absolutely, because that margin shrinks substantially when you're talking about, no disrespect to Princeton or Charleston Southern or Upstate, but those things shrink a lot, And look, we saw some of those things against Clemson. It was some plays here and there. You won game one against Clemson. You lost the next two, even though you got up in those. Some of it was hitting pitching, but there were also some other gaffes in there that you felt like were maybe a little bit more controllable that you didn't quite take care of. But, I am to go back to Sutter. It's hard to tell why it is, other than maybe sometimes you just chalk it up to it's baseball. Wes, you gave the example of when Ethan Petrie got here and going into his freshman year, he had, by all accounts, including his own, a terrible preseason. And then he comes in and does what he does for the rest of his career at South Carolina, and now he's a pro. Sutter, this wasn't a guy that you were like, oh, I think, maybe when he gets here he might be able to hit. Like, he's a proven guy, whether it was he's a JUCO guy, I think, at one point, then went to Purdue. He was a big-time player at Purdue. He hit in the 300s. He had a bunch of homers. He had a bunch of doubles. This is a guy that can hit for power and can hit to the gaps. He showed both of those, last night. He absolutely smoked that ball to left. He had another one he put in the gap. He's got a powerful swing. And so having him in the lineup, hitting like that, I'm not saying he's going to be this hot for the rest of the season. He'll have some stretches like everybody, but, he's got a 5-game hit streak now. He's got 3 doubles. He's got 3 home runs in that stretch. He's heating up big time, and Paul Maneri said it. He's looking like the guy that they recruited and what they know and thought he could be.
Well, and now that Reese Moore is going to be out for the rest of the year, if Sutter's not in your lineup to play second base, you got a spot for him at DH. You can have him in this lineup each and every day, or at least for the weekend series, that is, because, again, that was kind of a concern in the early stages of the season. Was he was in and out of the lineup, again, because Maneri was saying wasn't hitting well. He was making some mistakes in the field, got picked off the other day in one of the games in the midweek last week, got taken out. So, there was a small margin of error for him with this coaching staff. But, again, with the way he's hitting the ball, you can't help but have him in the lineup until he proves otherwise.
There's some interesting dynamics with Maneri and this guy.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it. Like, there's some interest. Maneri was ticked off on the mound on Saturday at one point. If if you're hitting like this, though, man, I'm not pulling this guy if he gets picked off. You know what I'm saying? Like, anymore.
Sure.
Like, if you're hitting like this, you have earned your way into the lineup. So, there's definitely some weird dynamics. But the guy's got to play. But he hasn't, at least from what I can tell, he never played second base at Purdue. Second base, I know you'd like to think you can just throw anybody out there. There's some skill to playing that position. It is a middle infield spot. He played first base. He played DH. I think I saw maybe a game at third at Purdue. He's not a middle infielder. So I'd assume just throw this guy in there at DH and let him go hit bombs.
Yeah, and maybe that's what they do. I don't know, but yeah, it has been odd to see how Maneri's handled him. And one thing I noticed from over the weekend, he didn't really talk about him unless he got asked about him, which I also think is kind of weird too. So kind of things that make you raise an eyebrow a little bit of like, what's going on here? But as long as he keeps hitting and stays in the lineup, we won't complain about it.
Yeah, maybe. I'm with you, Wes. I don't know what the dynamics are. Maybe this is part of it. You know, maybe if, I don't know, whatever somebody has done, whether it's, I mean, Sutter deserves obviously tons of credit, but whether it's something Sutter's done, how Maneri's handled it, but now it's gotten him to where he needs to be. Just everything, all the things that have happened up until now have got him where he needs to be. But you want to keep this going. I'm with you. If you're worried about fielding, base, get out there and just hit the ball.
Hey, don't got to worry about base running if it goes over the fence.
That's right.
There you go. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour, talk about what happened with men's basketball, and look ahead to the SEC men's tournament as well as we continue on with the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
Get it in, and here comes Meach into the front court. Pulls up, lets a long three go, and buries it. 7/10 of a second left. Meechie Johnson from 30 feet. Ole Miss will inbound to Dia. He lets it go with the buzzer, and it's off the top of the backboard. And you can put Spurs on this one. Meechie Johnson with a three-pointer in the final second of play wins it for the Gamecocks against Ole Miss, and Carolina will wrap up the regular season with its fourth SEC win of the season.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris wrapping up the hour here on your Monday on the Game. There's not been a lot of things to get excited about for men's basketball this year, but at least for Saturday, in the final couple seconds there, Meechie Johnson hits the game winner 64-61 to elevate South Carolina past Ole Miss to not only win the final game of the regular season and get themselves to 4-14 in conference play, also got themselves out of the doghouse of being the 16 seed. So technically speaking, they did exceed expectations for what people placed on them going into the year. Not by much, but it's something.
Yeah, and by the way, we're going to get back on Meechie and South Carolina. Did y'all see the graphic that Texas A&M put out?
Yes, about being tied for fourth when they're projected like 14th.
Yeah.
Not everything needs a graphic. I think On 3 has like inspired people to get graphic crazy because and their graphic guy does a phenomenal job with the one word. It's always very something that catches your attention.
Arrested, or whatever.
Yeah. I feel like people are trying to copy that, but yeah, not everything needs a graphic A&M.
They're getting engagement on it. That's for sure.
Which, hey, if that's what you're shooting for, then go for it, I guess. But yeah, bragging about being tied for fourth. Like, Carolina's not going to be like, hey, 14th when projected dead last.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a graphic.
And you know, there's certainly a difference. And you outplayed it by 10 spots or whatever. But yeah, not everything needs a graphic. But yeah, it was to go back to Meechie, it was a really cool moment for him. And you know, he's been really good, guys, really since February. Now there haven't been a lot of wins. There's been, in fact, just 2 wins for South Carolina in that stretch. But he is a guy that has to score to give you a chance, and he's done that. I mean, his worst performance in that stretch was the Missouri game where he scored 13 points. But, I mean, he had 35 against Texas, 26 against Bama. He's in the 20s in all games except the Kentucky one. Had just 17 against Ole Miss, but had, 3 3-pointers. And obviously that big one at the end was perfect on his free throws, 4 for 4. So, really cool to see, him have that moment at the end there to get South Carolina a win. It has not been what anybody, Meechie, Lamont Paris, the rest of the players, the fans certainly, not been what anybody wanted, not been what anybody expected after rebuilding this team this offseason. But cool moment for Meechie there to end the regular season in his last year.
Y'all ever just play on a team, like in whatever sport growing up, and got to the end of the year and it was just like, man, we're just not very good?
Yes.
Do y'all have that experience?
Yes.
Quite a few.
Yeah. Several.
I mean, and I'm not saying you have to like applaud the team or say it was a great year or anything like that. But I mean, I still remember the worst team I ever played on record wise. Like, I still remember that team. And late in the year, like, we gradually got better. Late in the year, this was baseball. We beat the best team in the league in like a 2-1 game and played our best game of the year. And for that team, that was kind of the extent of what that team was going to be. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was a high point for that team. So I think everybody kind of gave up on championships or making a tournament or anything like that for this group. You at least do have a moment there for Meechie, who came back, who got to actually have a senior night the other night. And, I think nobody outside of that locker room is maybe celebrating it a ton, but for the guys who still have busted their tails, have worked just as hard as any other team probably, even though the results haven't been there, I got to imagine that was, in its own way, kind of a special moment in the locker room for those guys. Just for this team, for the guys who have gone through it.
Yeah, and they do get themselves in a more favorable matchup for Wednesday as well. Now, it's going to be a very late game. It says 9:30, but probably be like 9:45, 9:50, considering how Ole Miss and Texas play in the game before that. But you play Oklahoma, a team that you did beat during the regular season. Now, again, is anybody here predicting Carolina to win 5 games in 5 days? No, but you actually have an opportunity to maybe get yourself into the second round, considering who you match up with in the first.
Yeah. I mean, you've beaten this team. I mean, how crazy would it be? What was that year, Tyler? We've talked about this before. Georgia was like not a good team, and they ended up they won the SEC tournament.
2008.
Yeah, 2008. Dennis Felton, head coach.
It was the tornado year.
Did they get bounced in the first round of the tournament?
I believe so.
I think they did. Nobody's projecting that either, right? But, I mean, for a guy like Michi, finishing it off strong like that, just go see what happens. There's nothing to lose. There's no pressure. You're not sitting here going, we got to play for seeding. We got to go win a game for seeding. There's none of that. Just go play.
Yeah. See what happens.
That is like I feel like the team everybody brings up when they have almost no statistical shot going into a tournament. Hey, that team did it.
That one time.
Real quick, boys, I got an alert from our friends at Firehouse.
Yep.
It's National Meatball Day today.
Hey.
So they have buy one, get one free meatball subs at participating Firehouse subs.
Sounds phenomenal to me. Go celebrate National Meatball Day with our friends at Firehouse Subs. Halftime show up next here on the game.
All right, everybody, let's tell you as we close out the show here about our friends over at Integrated Media. IntegratedMediaInc.com, 803-948-8327. That's where you can go to learn more about Michael, Nathan, and what they can do